Right, so talking to quite a few professional punters. Obviously, prices are important and value, etc. Do you price races up yourself?
No, and a good friends of mine do, and I can see the logic. I say I have price rules which I've already explained, and I can tell. I absolutely understand people telling me from a mathematical point of view that I'm wrong. But if a horse reaches a certain price with me, I always back it each way. For example, now that's not common, not necessarily a good thing, but as I said to you before, most of betting is about how you cope with it, and for me that's definitely the right thing to do. That's just the way I do things. I wouldn't preach to other people, so I don't price horses up, but unless if a horse is a certain price, I've already told you I won't back less than 2 to 1, for example, so anything before that's a no-no. After that, if I decide it's a bet, if it's between 2 to 1 and a certain price, I'll back it to win. If it's a bigger price, I'll back it each way. And it doesn't matter if it's a 24 runner handicap or a 6 runner conditions race. Those rules are just automatic for me. Briefly, see, I think it's quite important for a lot of people, not for everybody. I think the less decisions you have to make, the better. So many people have so many decisions, they might have 9 different ways they stake bets or how they bet or what they're doing. For me, my own decision is it a bet? The second decision will then be dictated by price. Is it a win bet or an each way bet? And the third decision, and it happens not that frequently, is it a double stake or the rarity, a treble stake? So that's basically it. So I keep it the simplicity for me is a very important thing, and it definitely works.
So what is your price for each way?
I basically if I get my money back. Effectively, 5 to 1, 4 to 1, so it really is that basic. And I say there'll be people who are, mathematically knowledgeable out there will be saying that's rubbish, and they're right, but they're not right in terms of inside my head.
Okay, so do you get involved with the betting exchanges and laying? Would a bet ever become a lay?
No, not a layer. Not a layer by nature. I'm a punter. Not saying it's wrong, but also most people who lay are laying very short, aren't they? Now, if you don't fancy a 3 to 1, basically you're backing a 1 to 3 chance. Okay,
so are there any, when you're looking at a day's racing, are there any types of races that you go down through the card and you just score through all of them?
That's a good point. I've had one bet in a bumper in my life, loser. But that's just how it is. I would not have a bet, not for any reason other than I'm just not really interested in sellers, and very, very rarely in a claimer. But that's just prejudice. It's not really anything else. There isn't a particular form of. I don't particularly go out my way. It's just how it works out. Okay. Last thing, I would have much less bets in 2-year-old racing than I would in 3-year-olds and upwards. I do have bets in 2-year-old racing, but really not that many, and certainly not many till the second half of the season, very few. But not that many in a year anyway.
Okay, we were talking earlier and you said you put a lot of horses down your notebook. So basically, if a horse isn't coming from your notebook that day, would you not even bother looking at it?
Oh no, I would do. So you say sometimes I might back a different horse anyway. What the notebook does is get me into a race. It gets me interested in, for some reason, and it's not necessarily a horse that I want to back. It's notes I've made about some specific note I might have made about a trip or a ground or a something, and that will just trigger me to look at the race, and that might be something for that. I then remember something else, or I'll go back and watch a VT or another horse which maybe I hadn't watched closely the first time and see something from it. It's more just the way into a card that you were asking me about earlier.
Okay, so what sort of time of day would you be trying to get your money on? And would a bad drift, something that was 5 to 2 in the morning, it's now 7 to 1, would that put you off, or would you go in again?
No, wouldn't go in again either. My bets, I'd always, these days, I used to bet on course, as I say. These days, my bets are always on before racing. And that's come from work as well. I have some bets the night before, but that's got very, very difficult. So most bets will be between when you get up in the morning and before you go out.
Okay, now I'm guessing that your sort of circle of friends would probably involve a lot of other punters. Do you listen to inside information? Do people ring you up?
No, I don't consider myself a tipster. I'm sure, again, people watching racing TV would agree with that. But I genuinely don't. I don't have a billion opinions. Certainly when I'm working, I try and give an overview of a race. Like discuss horses, what I may or may not know about them, rather than actually trying to say I think so and so will win. I really don't see myself maybe I should, but I don't see myself as a tipster.
Okay, would you be swayed by Hot and Co trainer and jockey lists?
I look at it, and I think it's exaggerated, but I can't. It'd be a lie to say doesn't affect me at all. But I think the devil's in the detail. That can mean a lot of things. That you can get a horse trader who hasn't had a winner for 2 weeks, and you look at their horses; they were all 25 to 1, and they were big. I think again that's a bit too simplistic. I can't say there's no effect, but it's not something I'm massively angst over.
And how important to you is reading between the lines when studying form?
That's a good question. Reading between the lines. Well, I think I see things when I'm watching which maybe aren't always picked up, but you like to think aren't always picked up by everybody. Subtleties of pace and stuff like that. So that would be about as far as it goes. I try not to take things literally. I tend to be sceptical, start from a sceptical point of view about good performances, for example. I try and find reasons why maybe they weren't. And I think that's quite a good habit for a punter. Some horse will win and gets rated 168 over jumps, and my first reaction is, maybe it's not that. So obviously, often it is, but I start from a point of view of maybe not believing.
Okay, now do you have, for your own sanity studying form, do you have to assume that everything is doing its best at all times?
I actually do. Now, like everybody else, I could certainly feel I've spotted my fair share of non-triers in the time. I absolutely hate that, to be truthful. I think a sports health depends on participants' rights. So I don't like cheats in cycling, I don't like cheats in athletics, I don't like cheats in horse racing. It's had a slight effect, and I'm definitely not going to go into details because the law reliable, but I've definitely had a slight effect on the way I've approached jump racing a few years ago. I was always having slightly less bets, but there were some things I didn't like, and it did affect the number. But it took down, if I was having 20% jump races, it probably took it down to 15%. But that's it. I can't, for the law reliable, give you details of that.
Right, so would you have a squiggle against certain jockeys' names which might put you off if they were the pilot?
I have scribbles against jockeys' names on, say on the flat, the jockeys I believe don't overly ride out horses for a place, or are less enthusiastic about doing so than others. And given, as I've already told you, a fair number of my bets will be each way, that's quite important. I like to have jockeys who I feel are going to push out to a finish, and there's some that I don't think are. So that would be a squiggle. And there will be some, I will have opinions. I wouldn't say, again, with some punters, jockeys are really, really important. And again, I respect that. I mean, they do, various firms do figures, don't they, of rating jockeys, and I'm not poo-pooing it and saying it's wrong. It would be fairly low down, the things I've said about. I've already told you, but I have my reason to get to a bet, and price then dictates what sort of bet I have. I then don't go down, make it overcomplicate it for me by having too much thought about who's riding it.
And what are your opinions on multiples?
I can see it, I don't do them, but that's just the way I am.
And how do you quantify in your own mind an unlucky run when nothing's going right, short heads, falling at last?
I think it's life. I don't like VAR in football, and the reason I don't like VAR is I think being lucky or unlucky, having a good decision or a bad decision, that's life. I can live with that, and I think that happens in racing. Of course you get irritated at the time, of course you do, but I think there'll be other times you have a bit of luck, and I just think it's take the rough with the smooth. I try to anyway.
Okay, now you've already said you bet a lot of each way. Leslie Spencer let you know that was a chink in the bookies' armour. They're not too keen on it. So how do you get your money on?
That's become much more difficult, but I'm going to move it on for me briefly. I think it's the biggest worry in horse racing, or one of the biggest worries in horse racing at the moment. I think the number of people, and I'm not talking about people like me, I'm talking about really ordinary social punters. The number of people who have restrictions, some with closures, clearly closures, but draconian restrictions, I think is absolutely appalling. And I think that racing might try and pretend that my next statement isn't true, but 95% of people who follow the sport do so through expressing their opinion through betting. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, they don't all bet for a living, but betting is actually intrinsically linked to horse racing. And I think if you alienate a whole raft of people by making life very, very difficult for them, I don't think it does any good. Back to Yorkers, for me, I've got very few bookmakers that I can get on with now, or to a realistic degree, and I'll have bits and bobs with a few people. But that's been the biggest change of the last 20 years, because the off-course market, the on-course market is, to my eyes, virtually dead, because they just bet into the machines behind them, and so you're reliant on trying to get bets on off course. Now obviously you have people help, friends help, and I get by, but it's definitely not like it was 10 years ago from my point of view.
Stick it up for the on-course bookmaker. You still get a lump on course if you want a lump though.
Yeah, but you're taking prices where maybe they know they can get at least that back at. I love on-course, but look, I've made my life going horse racing. I admire on-course bookmakers. It's not the same as it was, and they will tell you the same.
Now, do you ever feel the need to have a break to recharge your batteries and your brain when it comes to from punting?
I go on holidays, so that I guess it is, and if I'm away I'll try not to bet, but that's not because I'm doing it for that, that's just because I don't want to be thinking about other things. I don't particularly, as I say, that people do, you'll often get people who say that's the way they deal with the losing run, and that's fine, I can see that people pack it up completely for a while, recharge the brain. I've already said I don't really do that. I try and just plod on doing what I'm doing. So I really enjoy it, and I try not to get too stressed by it, so I don't particularly need a break from it. The only thing that gets laborious is the actual physically watching of tape. That can get a bit of a pain, so if you're going away for a couple of weeks, it's nice to have a break from that.
Okay, last two questions for people that ambitions to make money punting, or do it for a living like you do. What is the biggest mistake a punter can make?
I think the biggest mistake a punter can make is not. I think you've got to work out what you are, and I've said this so many times to people. You'll meet people in life who, by their nature, are people who want to get involved. I think you'll go. They're sort of an attacking nature. Whatever they do, they come racing. They'll have X number of bets, and they really like getting involved in lots of things. If that's the way you're made, I think that's how your betting should reflect, because what you won't do long term is do things you're not by temperament capable of. I think you've got to work out, the most important thing I think is to work out what sort of punter you are, what you're looking at. Are you circumspect, are you front foot, or are you back foot, basically, to use a cricket analogy. That's the thing that I do, and I think the most important thing for a punter, if you're taking it half seriously, is understand yourself and be consistent. Decide what you're doing, decide that's right for you, and do that. I think you should give things a go for a certain length of time before you change them. I think there should be a good reason. Too many people fiddle around changing the way they do things, and you're forever chasing your tail, and that never works.
Okay, we probably partially answered the last question in that one, but what would be the best lesson to learn extremely quickly as a punter if you want to emulate your success?
Well, that I probably am answering it the same way, is to have a grip on, is to get a grip on what you are and have your staking reflect your personality.
Brilliant. Well, Steve Mellish, thank you very much.
Pleasure.